Well, welcome today to Awkward Yogi, Yoga for Everybody. Today I'm going to be talking about a concept that we have all heard of, karma. So, karma sounds like, to us, it sounds like things like, oh, he'll get what's coming to him, or he gets what he deserves, or what goes around comes around. Sometimes it sounds like, oh, I have the worst luck of anybody. Does any of this sound familiar to you? If it does, that makes sense. In Western society, that's kind of how yoga is defined, or not yoga, karma is defined. Um, so karma is kind of defined in Western culture as like basically God's naughty and nice list. Basically, if we have enough good things we've done, then we get good karma. If we've done more bad things than good, then we get bad karma. Typically, karma is viewed as something that happens to us, not something that we have any control over. It just happens to us, and it happens to us in the forms of bad luck or punishment. So if we've done something bad, then we get punished for it. Makes sense, right? Because that's karma. If this is something you agree with, I'd love to hear about that. But for today, I want to discuss what yoga defines karma as, because naturally yoga has something to say about karma. So you've probably heard of karma in that way. It may be something you agree with or something that fits for you, and that's perfectly fine if it does. Some of you have probably heard of it, but maybe it doesn't quite sit right with you. It doesn't feel good to think that, but we're kind of conditioned to think that punishment is normal and natural and a logical conclusion to anything we've done that's bad. So it's good to understand that in yoga, first of all, karma is not its own thing. Karma is not a concept or a principle in of itself. Karma is actually a part of a whole wheel of karma, which has 6 whole steps in it. So first, I'd like to kind of define what karma's role is in that wheel. So, like I said, there's 6 steps in it. The first one is called vritti. Vritti is basically the Sanskrit word for feeling or thought, just something that just repeats or comes up. It's just kind of there. It just happens. We have a thought or a feeling. That's vritti. And then there is the second step, which is kama. That is Sanskrit's word for impulse or desire. So first we have a vritti. We have a thought or a feeling. And then we have kama, which is usually like we have an impulse or a desire to act on the feeling that we just felt. And then karma is the third step. And karma means action. That's to take action. So we first have a thought or a feeling, and then we have a desire. We want to do something about that feeling. And then we have karma. We take action on that desire. All of this first 3 steps happens like that. It takes no time. We usually aren't conscious of it. We don't think about it. It just there it is. We have a thought, a feeling, an impulse, and then an action. So, the other 3 steps, there's after karma, there is bhoga, which means experience. So when we take action on something, usually afterwards that follows is an experience. We experience the sensation of joy or relief, or we experience sadness or pain, whatever happens after this thought or feeling occurs and we take action on it. That is bhoga, the experience that happens afterwards. And then we have samskara. So after bhoga, after we experience the thing, samskara is basically how the experience and the feelings that happened in that experience get etched into our brain. So it's basically what we would call conditioning. So enough times having that experience, we're conditioned to expect that. And then if we do that enough times, we repeat this enough times, then it will become part of our vasana, or the Sanskrit word for self or essence. Like not self necessarily, but the essence of our self, our soul, or our personality, or our character. So karma is a part of that whole wheel. So we have a thought or a feeling, we have an impulse and a desire to act on that thought or feeling. We have karma, where we act on that feeling or thought, and then we have bhoga, the experience, samskara, the conditioning of repetitive experience, and then vasana, that experience becoming who we are. So it's important to understand these this concept of the wheel of karma, because that's really kind of where Western culture has more or less done us a disservice when it comes to the concept of karma. So again, like, why is it like that? Why is karma defined that way in Western society? Karma in Western culture is fear-driven. It is based on the ideas that there's a punishment behind every action, or there's a consequence behind every action, and there's a consequence every time we make a mistake, which is scary to think about. We make a lot of mistakes as people, and this Western idea of karma is kind of unforgiving. It makes us feel scared. It makes us afraid to make mistakes. It makes us feel powerless or helpless, hopeless. And it kind of doesn't really motivate us to want to do much differently than what we've been doing, because it's not really in our control. So, if you think about the way that Western society functions, it makes sense that we would think of it that way, because in Western society, we're really driven by our egos. And I don't mean that in like we're arrogant and self-centered. I mean that in the sense that we are driven by logic and things that are tangible, things we can see, things we can really just put into words and explanations in an easy way. That being said, if we're basing most of the ways that we act on logic, then it is logical that if there's a consequence to every action, then it's possible that punishment makes sense every time we make a mistake. So we believe that we deserve that punishment, and so therefore we perpetuate this concept of karma being what goes around comes around. Every time we make a mistake, punishment. And however that punishment comes through, whether it's bad luck or, something bad happens to us or someone we care about, we kind of just logically accept it as, well, makes sense. Did a bad thing, got a bad thing. So I think it would be a good idea to think about karma a little differently. And again, thinking of it in its whole sense, which is a part of a bigger process that happens to us and happens within us. So in yoga, of course, the biggest thing that we want to focus on is being able to connect everything that goes on up here to everything below it, connecting our mind to our body and connecting our mind and body to our spirit. We're experiencing all of that at any given time. And so it's important to understand that this isn't the only thing that matters. Our logic and our reasoning isn't the only thing that matters in the human experience. There's a lot more that goes on beneath that. And with karma, we actually get to have some control, and we get to have some power over our situation. So, like I said earlier, karma is kind of defined as like a fear-based type of thing in Western culture. But in yoga and Eastern culture, where yoga originated, it's actually a source of power. Karma is our source of power. That's actually where we get to create our karma. We get to create what we experience. So with karma, like I said, there's those first three steps are very important. The vritti, the kama, and the karma. So that space between kama, or our impulse and desire to act on something, and karma, which is where we actually follow through with that action, there is a moment between those two things where we have the opportunity to change our karma. Yoga helps us to kind of take a step back and kind of take a step away from everything we're experiencing in a moment and take pause between those 2 points in our perspective. So imagine you're feeling angry about something. So the anger comes up, whatever experience it is that causes it, just imagine that sensation of anger. Anger comes up, that's our feeling, our vritti, our feeling that comes up. Our impulse, for example, our desire might be to release that anger. It's not a comfortable thing to be angry. It doesn't feel good. It's usually not something we really like to hold on to. Some people do, but most of the time we don't want to feel it, so we want to release it. Sometimes the way we release our anger is by being physically destructive. So, for example, you might want to throw something or punch something, like a wall. I feel like most people have done that at least once. I know I have. So when you're angry, you want to punch a wall. So you think to yourself, or you have that moment where you have a vritti, you have anger, you have that impulse, that desire to release it, so you want to punch something. Then you take action on it, which is karma. You do punch something. You put a hole in your wall. Now you have to go through and repair it. Now you have people who are like, oh man, that person, Kimber, put a hole in her wall. Can you believe that? So then you're like, oh man, people hate me. I'm just such an angry person. And then it just perpetuates, right? So imagine though, if you felt that anger, you had that desire to release it, and then you paused for a second and you thought to yourself, okay, I'm feeling angry. I really don't like this feeling and I want it to go away. Normally, I would punch a hole in my wall. But today, I think I'm going to try something different. That is your power. And you just took complete control of yourself in that moment. And you took complete control of your power to change your karma, to change the action you take. And that's where we get to create our experience. And that's actually very empowering. I mean, if you think about it, you're not subject. Karma's not happening to you. You're making karma happen. And that is very empowering. And it gives us a lot of space to grow and a lot of space to really improve some things in our life. Obviously, you know, shit happens all the time. We can't control ourselves, everything about ourselves or everything about anything around us. So yeah, we're gonna have moments where just bad stuff happens or bad luck befalls us and we kind of have that moment of like, this is just my luck. But the reality of it is, even in those moments, we get to take pause. So even in those moments, we have a vritti, we feel or we think, oh, this is just my luck. We have an impulse or desire to do something about it. So that impulse may be like, oh, this is just my luck. I'm gonna just give up and blame someone else for it. And then our karma would be to act on that. So we end up being like, well, it's Jimmy at work's fault. I wish he hadn't, you know, told me I was scheduled today to work. I don't know. I'm just trying to make an example here. But that's kind of the thing. We could blame Jimmy, or we could be like, okay, well, shit just happens. I'm gonna move forward and be positive about it, or at least try to deal with it. You don't necessarily have to be positive, but you can deal with it. And so we get that choice to change our karma, which I think is really great. And I think yoga really does help with that process because it breaks it down. It breaks it down into steps how karma happens. It breaks it down into we actually kind of create it for ourselves by acting on these things that happen in us that usually happen just lightning speed. But if we take the time to really sit back and kind of step away from our whatever experience we're having in the moment, then we really do get the opportunity to take that pause and make that change. And so basically, you have all of the power. Whereas we may have been conditioned to think that karma happens to us and that karma is something to be scared of and that we have to act exactly in a line and we will make mistakes, and sure, that's okay to make mistakes, but we will be punished for it. Instead of that thinking, what can be more helpful is thinking of karma as your own power. It is your own place to change your life, to change the outcome of some of the things that happen. You know, we can't control how we got to this point. Sometimes the things that go on in our head, they're usually repetitive, they're usually defeating, just not good self-talk. And you know, sometimes that stuff got there by our own choice, and sometimes that stuff got there by our conditioning. Maybe we were brought up with unsupportive family, or, you know, feeling just down on ourselves in one way or another, had traumatic experiences that really kind of put in our head something that tells us that we need to be on edge or scared of things all the time. You know, that isn't necessarily our fault. You know, we didn't necessarily get to this point in our lives with these thoughts and these repetitive cycles and these things that keep happening. You know, we didn't necessarily do that all to ourselves. But from this moment forward, with this knowledge, you now have the choice to change it. And that can be really terrifying and intimidating because, you know, having power means you have responsibility. That responsibility includes being accountable for your own actions and being humble enough to admit when you've made a choice that has impacted you in a negative way. And that can be really intimidating and really difficult. You know, looking at yourself is hard to do. But the reality is that that is also your power. And holding yourself accountable to your own choices and your own actions is really where you get to begin that first step of making something new for yourself. So, you know, I'd like to ask you if, you know, in any way, you know, you've thought to yourself those things that I said in the beginning about, oh, my bad luck, or oh, just what goes around comes around. If you felt like, if you do feel like currently you just constantly have bad luck, or you're constantly falling on hard times, or, you know, if you feel like, you know, that there's just repeating things that happen that you just don't understand why they're happening. I'd be more than happy to talk to you about that. Maybe we can find a way to, you know, break it down and see where your karma is, where that moment is for you to change that. So I invite you to send me a message, and we'll set up a meeting time, and we can talk about those things, and hopefully we can create a path for you to follow that will help you change your karma. So hope you've enjoyed this information, and if you have any questions or would like to kind of add your own experience or maybe your own thoughts about it, please feel free to comment below or just send me a message if you have questions. But yeah, I'd love to talk to you directly and set up a time to meet and kind of go over your karma and yeah, so look forward to it. Thank you.